Hi, I'm Brenna, and I was just trying to pay for my mom's medical treatment when my dad gave my credit card to my sister for a 3-day spa vacation. They told me she needed rest. They told me I was overreacting. Then she sent me a message. Fix the card, I need to book another tour. So I froze the card. And when they blamed me, I sold the house. What do you do when the people who raised you rewrite loyalty as silence and expect you to keep paying for it? The message came at 8:07 p.m., right as I was rinsing out my coffee cup. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles deep into the drywall, and I remember the way the hum of the fridge seemed louder than usual. I glanced at my phone expecting a work ping. It was from my dad, Clive. A video. In it, Mom was coughing gently, leaning on the counter, her figure backlit by our dim kitchen lamp. Her sweater sleeves were rolled halfway up her arms, and there was a kettle steaming in the background. She looked tired. He'd written, "Doctor says we should act fast. We need help with the bills. She doesn't want to worry you." No panic, no urgency, just a tone that felt rehearsed, like he'd said it before. I didn't hesitate. That's the part that still gets to me. I didn't ask a single follow-up question. I transferred $40,000 from my card. Quietly. No drama. Because that's who I was in the family. The one who stepped in, not the one who stepped back. I've always believed emergencies whisper before they scream. But this whisper had a script. 3 nights later, I was cleaning out old flagged emails, trying to sort through the mess of life admin clutter that piles up when you don't sleep well. And there it was, an email from Dad dated 10 months ago. Same subject, same video, same cough, same light, same sweater. Only the timestamp was wrong. Last year. My hand stopped on the mouse. My stomach didn't drop. That's the thing. It was too quiet in me. That's when I knew something had shifted. Either he forgot he'd used it, or he knew exactly what he was doing and thought I wouldn't catch it. I called him the next morning, as casual as I could manage, asked how Mom was doing. He told me she was resting more now, said, "She didn't want to burden you." Then, like it was nothing, he added, "Zinnia's staying over to help cook." Zinnia. Even her name made me taste metal. She was always just visiting, always just between things, never with a plan, never without a need. And Dad, he always acted like she was sunshine after a storm, when she was the storm itself. But it wasn't her name that bothered me. It was what he didn't say. It was the silence that built a wall between his words. Later that night, I got a notification on my phone. Zinnia tagged me in a photo. I didn't even think before clicking. There she was. Legs crossed on a balcony in Maui, tropical drink in one hand, her face glowing with that curated peace only influencers and people with no rent ever managed to have. She was wearing the burgundy coat I gave her last Christmas, the one she called too plain. Back then, she opened the box and gave me that tight smile, like she was accepting charity. Now she was flaunting it like it was designer. The caption read, "Nothing like island peace. One self-care Shaksh deserved." I stared at the image longer than I should have. That coat, that tone, that backdrop. It wasn't just a trip, it was a performance. And I was funding the props. I tapped through the rest of her story. Private yoga, champagne brunch, a $400 massage. Not a single mention of our mother's condition. No mention of stress, no hint of anything urgent. Mom was supposedly sick. Dad said it was urgent. But Zinnia? She was getting her chakras aligned and posting gratitude quotes. I put the phone down, walked into my kitchen, sat at the table, pulled up my budgeting app. Alani Resort Spa. $14,700. Booked under my card. She didn't just use my name. She walked into a world I paid for and posed like it was hers. I didn't cry, didn't rage. I opened my notes app, typed 2 words, medical lie. Then I opened that video again. Pressed play, slowed it down, looked beyond my mother's figure. There, hanging behind her, was last year's calendar, November, still up in spring. How fitting. They didn't lie because they were desperate. They lied because they knew I wouldn't fight. They knew I'd keep the ship afloat, no matter how many holes they drilled beneath me. I thought I was paying to keep Mom alive. Turns out, I was funding someone's Instagram vacation. The ding from my phone at 6:17 a.m. pulled me out of that gray space between sleep and obligation. I was still lying in bed, half draped in a throw blanket, when the screen lit up with a voicemail from Zinnia. No text, no context. I sat up, pressed play. "Fix the card, I need to book another tour." That was it. No, "good morning." No, "how's work?" Not even a weak, "hey." Just a clipped order, like she was reminding me to restock the fridge. Like I was the concierge of her 5-star lifestyle. I didn't respond. I sat there, phone in hand, staring at the ceiling like it had answers. Then I opened the voicemail again, this time recording the screen. Not because I didn't believe it happened, but because I needed evidence. That was the first moment I realized. I needed to stop trusting memory. I needed receipts. The card company's hotline was already saved in my contacts. I called, gave my verification, listened to the hold music hum in the background like it had no idea the world was falling apart. When the rep picked up, I asked if there were any recent charges. "Yes," she replied. "There are several pending transactions from a travel service, Island Getaways Inc. Would you like to review them?" I didn't ask how much. I didn't want to know. "I'd like to freeze the card, permanently." I could hear the hesitation on the other end, like she wasn't sure if I meant it. "I understand," she finally said. "We'll take care of it." The silence in my bedroom felt different after that. Not peaceful, not empowering, just clean. Like someone had finally wiped the slate, even if it left behind scars. At 8:03 a.m., the group chat buzzed. Family bubbles. Zinnia had posted, "Looks like the card's not working. Weird. Can someone fix it, please?" 10 minutes later, Clive chimed in. "Brenna, could you check? It was working fine earlier." No one asked why she had access to it in the first place. No one said thanks for all the months I had quietly paid the bills they pretended to juggle. I didn't reply. I didn't even open the thread. I left it on read, not because I was petty, but because I had finally realized something vital. Silence only feels rude when the person losing control isn't used to not being heard. That afternoon, I opened the chat to scroll. Curiosity or punishment? I don't know. Under my profile photo, someone had changed my name to Finance HQ. A bank emoji followed. Zinnia replied with a laughing emoji. Marjorie added, "So true, our little helper." Helper, not daughter, not sister, not partner in care, just helper. I closed the app without reacting, but inside, something sharp lodged beneath my ribcage. It didn't bleed. It didn't roar. It just sat there, heavy and unmoving. Later, I remembered something from college, senior year, advanced communication class. We had a big group project. I wrote the entire report, researched, cited, edited. But during the final presentation, another girl stood in front of the room and spoke every word like she had carved them herself. The professor smiled at her, then looked at me and said, "You're the reliable one, not the face." Back then, I had nodded, grateful somehow to be labeled dependable. Now I saw the truth. That wasn't a compliment. That was a warning. Around 9:12 p.m., another message popped in. Zinnia again. "I really need to finalize the yoga excursion. Can we please hurry up?" Still no acknowledgement. Still no pause. And no one, neither mom nor dad, stepped in to say anything. Not a single sentence to suggest they saw me as more than a debit card with a pulse. I didn't answer. I didn't vent. I opened my laptop, pulled up a fresh spreadsheet, and titled it, "What They Owe." No, it wasn't about money. Not really. It was time, emotional labor, birthdays spent cleaning up after their messes, apologies that never came, calls I always made first. Line by line, I listed it all. When someone names you the family bank, don't be surprised when they forget you're human. The numbers on that spreadsheet didn't look like finances. They looked like years I'd loaned out without interest. And the deeper I went, the more I realized the currency wasn't just money. It was patience, self-restraint, silence. I closed the laptop around midnight, then sat for a while at the edge of my bed, watching the stillness of my room like it might whisper back some sense. By morning, the weight hadn't lifted. I moved around the kitchen slower than usual. The mug I reached for still had traces of yesterday's coffee. I rinsed it out, poured a fresh cup, and tried not to look at my phone. Just once, I wanted a quiet morning without an electronic tug at my sense of self. Instead, I opened the drawer under the counter, the one that held things no one remembered: old can openers, batteries, and my grandmother's recipe book. It was leather-bound, faded along the spine, and filled with her precise cursive. As I flipped through it, looking for nothing in particular, a small slip of paper fluttered out and landed on the floor. I picked it up. Her handwriting was unmistakable. Never let them spend your heart like spare change. The ache that line caused wasn't new. It had just been dormant. Inez, my grandmother, had never been loud, but she was the only one who had ever looked me in the eye when I wasn't useful. I stood at the stove, the note pressed between my fingers, and a memory bubbled up like an unwanted burn. I was 11, maybe 12, and Zinnia had just thrown a tantrum because her bracelet broke. She screamed loud enough to send cousins scattering. I'd tried to fix it for her. My fingers clumsy with the wire, she pushed me away. I remember sitting on the back porch steps later, hot-faced and embarrassed. Inez had sat next to me, handed me a glass of lemonade, and whispered, "When someone takes more than they give, they're not sharing, they're stealing softly." Back then, I didn't understand. I thought she meant Zinnia was spoiled. I didn't realize she meant all of them. Around 9:45 that same morning, my phone rang. It was Mom. I answered because a part of me still believed she might say something different this time. She didn't. "Zinnia's been overwhelmed lately," she began, soft and measured, like she was giving a weather report. "The trip was supposed to help. She's had so much pressure, you know." Pressure. The word almost made me laugh. "She's always been sensitive," Mom continued, "and she didn't mean anything by it. But would you consider unfreezing the card? Just for this weekend? It might help her settle." I didn't reply immediately. I let her words linger in the air like a perfume I didn't ask to wear. I looked down at the slip of paper still in my hand. Inez's writing, still bold, still true. "Never let them spend your heart like spare change." I finally spoke. "So there was no surgery?" Silence. Mom cleared her throat. "Well, not surgery in the literal sense. Emotional stress, the therapist said. The kind of stress that can be just as dangerous. Brenna, you've always been the practical one, but..." "So there was no procedure scheduled, no doctor, no hospital." She sighed. "I thought if I told you it was for Zinnia, you'd say no." I nodded slowly, not that she could see me. "You're probably right." I thanked her for the call, wished her a good day, and hung up before she could sweeten the insult further. There wasn't rage inside me, not even hurt anymore. What I felt was clean. Cold, perhaps, but steady. The kind of clarity that doesn't shake, it sharpens. I opened my laptop again, typed Oregon real estate attorneys into the search bar. Not for a lawsuit, not yet, but because every system has pressure points. And I had finally found mine. There's no panic in clarity, only decisions. Before I closed the laptop, I reached for a tack and pinned Inez's note on the board above my desk. It sat crooked between old appointment cards and a coupon I never used, but it didn't need to be centered. It just needed to stay. They weren't hiding the truth. They just renamed it until I stopped recognizing the lies. It was Monday afternoon, the kind where the sky hovers somewhere between gray and judgment. I was sitting on the porch, letting the condensation on my iced coffee trace lazy rivers down the glass, when my phone lit up with Dad's name. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. I hadn't heard from him directly in over a week. Not since the card froze and the group chat went silent on me. Against my better judgment, I answered. His voice was unusually pleasant, like someone who had rehearsed being unbothered. "Hey, kiddo," he said. "Just checking in." We exchanged a few lines. Weather, work, things that didn't matter. Then, like he'd been waiting for the pause, he said it. "You've always been a little jealous of Zinnia, haven't you?" I didn't flinch. I didn't ask him to repeat it. I just looked out at the maple tree across the street and let the words hang there. "She's always been freer," he continued, like he was offering analysis, not an insult. "You've always been more structured. That's why you don't understand her choices. You get caught up in rules." I took a slow breath through my nose. "Structured people pay for freedom, I guess," I said. "And sometimes for everything else, too." There was silence, then a shift in his tone. Something clipped. "Don't take it the wrong way, Brenna. We're just different." That was the point, wasn't it? I ended the call politely, said I had a work meeting, then sat there, letting my fingers tighten around the armrest until the wood creaked beneath my palm. I wasn't angry in the usual way. I was aware. Like a fog I hadn't known was their head finally lifted. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened my Instagram, something I rarely did anymore, and there it was. A message request from a name I didn't expect. Damon, Zinnia's ex. "Hey," it started. "Hope it's okay I'm reaching out. Saw your last post. Thought you should know. Zinnia used to brag you'd never say no, especially with money. Said you were dependable like a vending machine." Attached was a screenshot from an old group chat. There she was, clear as daylight. "She won't even ask questions. That's her thing. You push B3 and she hands over the weekend." My stomach didn't drop. My hands didn't shake. I felt nothing. And then everything. I didn't reply. I didn't type a single word. I just downloaded the screenshot and saved it to a new folder on my desktop. I named it. They said it themselves. I sat in that stillness, letting the echoes roll in. All those times I'd caught her sneaking into my closet, into my bank account, into conversations with people I'd introduced her to, and I let it slide. I told myself she was lost, overwhelmed, misunderstood. No, she was practiced. A memory surfaced like a splinter. Zinnia at 13, stealing $20 from Mom's purse. I told her to stop. She dared me to say something. I did. Mom called me spiteful and said, "She's under stress. Why would you make it worse?" That script never changed. I just stopped reading the lines. I reached for a pen and my old leather-bound journal, the one I hadn't touched since Inez died. I started writing, not paragraphs, not reflections, just facts, dates, quotes, screenshots, receipts. Who said what? When? How many times I covered rent? Who I bailed out? What I gave up? I wasn't building a case out of bitterness. I was building it out of order. If no one else was going to remember the truth, I'd document it. One fact at a time. By Tuesday evening, I was staring at numbers that should have made me shake. They didn't. They just confirmed what my gut had already decided days ago. The itemized bill from the Alani Royal Haven Resort had finally populated on my credit card app. $14,700 for a suite. $3,800 for spa treatments. $2,000 for champagne and catering. And right there, under one of the charges, Zinnia Wilson, guest of Brenna Wilson. She didn't steal. She signed her name, clean, elegant cursive, like it belonged beside mine. Like this was something we agreed on. Like I had nodded and said, "Sure, go relax on a beach I'll never see." I clicked the resort's contact page and dialed. A woman answered with too much cheer. "Alani Royal Haven, thank you for calling. How can I help you?" I kept my tone flat. "I'm calling to confirm a recent stay on a card I own. Can you pull the guest details?" After some back and forth, she read out the name, the room type, the package. Oceanfront Presidential Suite includes private chef dinner, couples spa experience, and rooftop yoga. And the guest said she was, I asked, already knowing the answer. Ms. Zinnia Wilson. She said the trip was a gift from her sister. Of course she did. Please note this transaction as unauthorized. and forward all receipts, correspondence, and, if possible, video footage of check-in directly to my attorney, I said. There was a pause, then a polite, "Certainly." I hung up. That was the moment the line between forgiveness and boundary became a wall. Later that evening, around 7, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I saw Mom through the side window, holding a Tupperware of banana bread like it was a peace treaty. I opened the door. She smiled like nothing had shattered. "I thought you might like a little treat," she said, stepping inside before I could decide. "Fresh from the oven. Zinnia helped with the cinnamon." I let her in. I let her talk. I offered tea. We sat at the table, the banana bread untouched between us. She shifted her purse from shoulder to floor, then onto the table. That's when a slip of paper slid out from the side pocket. I saw the receipt the moment it hit the wood, white with red ink. The restaurant's logo I knew well. High-end, candlelit, full of happy anniversary tables and first dates. Won $200 for dinner. Dated last Saturday. On the back, in Zinnia's handwriting. "Thanks, Jess." I picked it up without a word. Mom chuckled lightly, awkwardly. "Oh, Zinnia wanted to make it look like it came from you. She thought it would be cute. You're always so generous." "That's not generosity, Mom," I said, not raising my voice. "That's identity theft with a smile." She blinked, then gave the kind of half-laugh people give when they know they've said something ugly, but hope you'll let it slide. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why she thought that was acceptable. I folded the receipt in half, slipped it under my planner, and waited for her to leave. After she did, I photocopied it, tucked it into a folder I had labeled earlier that day. Patterns of proof. That night, I sat at my desk with only one light on. I logged into my online banking, navigated to the automatic payments section, and canceled every monthly transfer going to the house in Eugene. Water, electricity, internet. No warning, just a full stop. Then I opened Dropbox, removed my family's shared access to all our old tax documents, health records, and joint accounts. I didn't delete them. I just took back the keys. Last thing I did was tap open the Family Bubbles group chat. I didn't send a message. I just hit leave conversation. Then I opened Instagram, created a story, selected close friends, just one name on that list. Zinnia. I posted a quote that said, "Givers have to set limits because takers rarely do." No caption, no emoji, just silence. Some things don't require revenge, just receipts and a resignation from the role they cast you in. I didn't go to bed angry that night. I went to bed done. There's a difference. Anger hopes. Being done doesn't. Morning arrived like a slow, weightless thud. I made coffee out of habit, not taste. The cup warmed my hands, but nothing reached my chest. I opened my email, scrolling past ads and junk. Then I saw it. Subject: Credit Safe Alert. New inquiry under your name. I clicked. A $28,000 loan. Approved 3 months ago. Listed under my full legal name and current address. Lender: a niche personal finance company I'd never heard of. The borrower: Zinnia, my sister, using my address, my credentials, my history. They hadn't just taken my money. They'd borrowed my existence, with the confidence of people who knew I wouldn't cause a scene. I called the lender, keeping my tone even, professional. When the rep picked up, I verified my identity, then asked her to walk me through the application. "Huck, I'm seeing a digital signature," she said. "It matches an older document on file, possibly from school records?" I paused. "What documents exactly?" She continued. "A scanned utility bill to verify the address. Same address as yours. The IP address used traces back to a residential account in Eugene." "My parents' house." I asked her to send everything to my email. I told her the signature was fraudulent. She said someone from the fraud department would be in touch. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the wall. There was no screaming, no pacing, just quiet. The kind that solidifies into resolve. I opened my phone and forwarded the documents to Alaric, my attorney. Subject line: New entry, Zinnia loan fraud. His response came under 15 minutes. This qualifies as identity theft. We can press charges or use this as leverage in civil negotiations. Your call. I replied with 2 words: prepare both. By evening, I moved from reaction to redirection. It was time. I logged into the utility accounts for the Eugene house, bills I'd been silently covering for years. I had told myself it was to help Mom, but helping had become hiding, enabling even. I clicked into each one: electric, gas, internet, water, and canceled the autopay. I removed my card, deleted my billing info. No one would notice, until they noticed. Then I opened the Dropbox folder where I kept all the family's shared tax documents, health insurance files, and scanned IDs. I changed the permissions, revoked their access. Nothing malicious, just separation. The digital kind that marks a shift deeper than a locked door. That night, I sat at my dining table, surrounded by silence and papers. I opened my journal again, the one I'd started filling with facts. But this time, I reached for folders. One by one, I labeled them: identity, financial abuse, verbal manipulation, legal prep. Then I printed everything: credit report screenshots, receipts, emails, texts, every proof of theft dressed up as family loyalty. I didn't do it for court, I did it for me. Because sometimes survival isn't loud, it's organized. I paused halfway through, looked down at the page I was about to hole punch, the fraud form, and I wrote a note in the corner: you can't burn down the bridge and ask me to carry you across the river. Then I sat back. I didn't check messages. I didn't scroll. I didn't wait for anyone to notice my absence. They would. I didn't tell them the bridge was gone. I let them try to cross it first, and feel the fall. Thursday morning arrived like nothing had happened. Sunlight over my kitchen sink, the hum of the fridge, the usual weightlessness of a day that didn't demand too much. Until it did. My phone buzzed at exactly 8:09 a.m. Voicemail: Zinnia. Hey, I heard the water got shut off. Did you forget the payment? Anyway, no biggie. Let's talk soon. No tension in her voice. No shame. Just that soft lilt she used when she was about to ask for more. It was cheerful entitlement, wrapped in that breezy tone she wore like perfume. There's something chilling about a thief who still expects hospitality. I played the message twice, once to confirm the words, and once to confirm my response: silence. Later that day, a text arrived from Mom. Zinnia wants to apologize. She's really emotional right now. I didn't respond. 30 minutes later, Zinnia called. Her voice was delicate, scripted. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said slowly, like reciting from a cue card. Maybe I messed up, but you've always been the strong one. I admire that. Admire? That word didn't land. It bounced off something inside me that no longer needed her recognition. While she was mid-sentence, another notification slid down the top of my screen. Unknown number, no name. They're rehearsing. I heard Zinnia and your mom go over lines. Say sorry, she'll melt. Just a heads up. I stared at the message, then back at the call still in progress. Zinnia was saying something about healing the bond. I said one sentence. You're not apologizing, you're performing. Then I ended the call. No yelling, no tears. Just the kind of click that carries weight when there's nothing left to clarify. An hour passed. I made myself tea, answered 2 work emails, tried to distract myself with a spreadsheet until another email popped up. From Alaric. Subject line: new filing, address fraud confirmed. He attached the documentation. Car loan application. Cosigner, my name. Listed address, mine. Dealership, Sunset Auto Leasing. Application date, 1 week before the Hawaii trip. Same IP address as the fraudulent loan. This time, I didn't hesitate. I replied, send cease and desist, official notarization, add it to the file. It wasn't just identity theft anymore. It was boundary obliteration. They counted on my silence for so long, they assumed it was consent. I spent the afternoon in motion. No announcements, no social media quotes. I didn't even lock the door when I left. I just needed air and action. By 3 p.m., I was sitting across from the lawyer who'd helped us close on the Eugene house years ago. His office smelled of old coffee and printer paper, and nothing had changed on the walls since the last time I was there. I laid down 2 folders, one labeled, Liabilities Created, the other, Assets Owned. He raised an eyebrow, opened the first one. Do I want to ask what's in here? Proof, and pressure points. He nodded, more curious than alarmed. And the goal? I don't want to ruin anyone, I said, voice level. But I want my name back. I want it out of their mouths, off their papers, and off their wish list. He leaned back in his chair. Then we start with leverage, quiet, documented, effective. I shook his hand, feeling more steady than I had in weeks. Alaric called as I walked out. They'll push back, he said. They'll call it betrayal. They already did, I replied. Now I'm just writing it down. By the time I got back home, the sky had shifted, blue edged with orange, that soft hush of dusk. I pulled out my journal again, added a new entry. I don't want to ruin anyone, but I do want my name to stop being a currency in this family. Alaric had said, then let's close the bank. And so I did. I gave them 4 days, not to move out, but to wake up. Only one of us did. Friday morning began with a silence I didn't break. I didn't need to. Everything that needed saying had already been documented, signed, and sealed. Literally. I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house at 7:45 a.m. sharp. The street was quiet, the same sleepy suburban hum that had wrapped this place in illusions for years. But I wasn't here for sentiment. I stepped out of the car, holding a manila envelope. Inside, a copy of the house deed in my name, a notarized 4-day notice to vacate, and a printed breakdown of every mortgage, tax, and repair payment I had made over the past 6 years. Not accusations, just facts. I didn't knock. I didn't ring the bell. I just placed the envelope on the porch, dead center on the welcome mat. Then I turned and walked back to my car, closed the door with care, and drove away. The truth doesn't need ceremony, just delivery. That evening, my phone rang. Clive. I let it buzz twice before answering. His voice was tight, careful. What is this about, Brenna? I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the fading light. It's not about anything, I said. It's about everything. And it's legal. You're breaking your mother's heart, he shot back. She broke mine years ago, I said evenly. This isn't revenge, it's just delivery. He hung up. No goodbye. Just static and a beep. Saturday came with gray clouds and a knock on my door I didn't expect. Zinnia stood there, eyeliner barely holding, shoulders pulled up like armor. We can talk this through, she said, voice brittle but forced into a smile. You're not really going to sell the house, right? I handed her a copy of the real estate agreement, highlighted in yellow. Closing scheduled for Monday, keys required by noon. She stared at it like it was written in another language. That's not fair, she muttered. You didn't even give us a chance. You had years of chances, I said. This is me giving myself one. She didn't reply, just stood there for a moment, then walked away without looking back. Sunday morning, I returned to the Eugene house, not alone. The locksmith was already there, waiting. He nodded and got to work while I sat in my car across the street. By the time the locks had been changed, the show had begun. Zinnia was first to arrive, trying her old key and realizing quickly it didn't fit. Clive came next, yelling before he even reached the porch. You can't do this. This is your mother's home. Marjorie didn't speak. She just stood at the curb, arms folded, staring at the house like she'd never seen it before. I stepped out of my car, walked over calmly with a second envelope in hand. This house is mine, I said clearly. I paid for it. You lived in it. That ends now. I handed Clive the legal paperwork. He didn't take it at first. I placed it gently on the porch step. Then I turned around, walked back to my car, and left. No threats, no apologies, just boundaries made real. In my rearview mirror, I saw Zinnia crying, Clive pacing and cursing into his phone. Marjorie didn't move. She looked frozen, not with anger, but recognition. It wasn't shock. It was the moment someone finally sees the cost of what they've been handed for free. I didn't change the locks to be cruel. I changed them because I finally realized the door was never mine to walk through, only to keep open. Monday at noon, I stood across the street from what used to be my family's house. The sun had finally burned through the morning clouds, painting the porch with an uncomfortable warmth. A young couple parked in the driveway, trunk open, boxes in their arms. A toddler bounced around their ankles, giggling as a golden retriever tried to grab a plush toy from his hand. It was a picture-perfect scene, the kind realtors dream of and families post on moving day. I should have felt something sharp. I didn't. Just a quiet release, like watching someone else finally inherit the burden you carried for too long. New lives moved in with fresh paint. My family was still tangled in the wallpaper. My phone buzzed. A message from the real estate agent. Transfer complete. Keys received. Congrats, Brenna. I didn't type back. I just slid the phone into my coat pocket and leaned against my car, watching the couple disappear inside. The night before, I'd driven by the house just once more, lights still on, boxes half packed near the window. I hadn't intended to stop, but Clive had been outside, tossing old tools into the back of his truck. He looked up when he saw me and walked over, jaw tight, eyes sharp. "This isn't what family does," he said, voice low. "No," I replied. "Family doesn't steal your name, your credit, your dignity. What you mean is control." He started to argue, but Marjorie had come out from behind the garage, her face drawn. "She's right, Clive," she said, her voice surprisingly clear. "We used her." He didn't speak after that, just walked back to the truck, his silence finally heavier than mine. That moment didn't bring me peace, but it brought me confirmation. Sometimes acknowledgement is all you get. Sunday, before I left the house for good, I parked out front one last time. Zinnia was inside, dragging boxes without direction. Marjorie sat on the front step, eyes unfocused, like she wasn't packing up a home, but watching something sink. I didn't walk in. This wasn't revenge. This was removal. Still, I allowed myself one step inside, just to breathe the space once more. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and worn memories. I paused in the entryway. There, on the wall beside the coat closet, hung the framed family photo from Christmas 8 years ago. I remembered that day. I wore a green sweater and stood on the far right, next to the tree. Zinnia was front and center, Clive and Marjorie close behind. Inez had been in it too, before Zinnia cropped the photo to post it online. In the frame that hung now, my shoulder was missing. Even in pictures, I had always been edited out. This time, I gave them the full crop. I turned, walked back outside, and didn't look back. I left the house key beneath the ceramic frog planter by the front step, texted the new owners. "All clear, wishing you laughter." The drive home was long but quiet. Somewhere along the back roads, I pressed play on an old voicemail from Inez. She had left it during one of the family's colder winters. "Baby," she said, "you don't need to fight to be seen. You just need to walk into places that already have light." That night, I made tea and sat in my kitchen, the one I paid for, in the house I had filled myself. I thought about everything I had done, and everything I had stopped doing. I didn't regret the locks, the documents, or the silence. What I regretted was how long it took me to believe I was allowed to protect myself. The worst part of being erased isn't that they forget you. It's that they expect you to thank them for the effort. The next morning passed uneventfully, until it didn't. By 10:12 a.m., I was sipping coffee on my porch in Portland, sorting through junk mail, when my phone rang. The screen lit up. "Mom." I stared at the name, thumb hovering. I hadn't heard her voice since the locks changed and the porch emptied. I should have let it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered. "Hi," I said flatly. Marjorie's voice was barely above a whisper, soft and shaky, like she'd rehearsed sorrow in the mirror. We need to talk," she said. "It's not what you think." I didn't respond. She took that as an invitation. "Zinnia's been crying," she added, a tremble carefully placed for effect. "She wanted to get you something from Hawaii. It was supposed to be a surprise." A surprise, paid for with my credit, in my name. "With which money?" I asked quietly. There was silence on the line. Then came the soft chuckle, one I'd heard all my life when they wanted to wave discomfort away. "You always take things too seriously, Brenna." I closed my eyes for a breath. "Not anymore." I ended the call before she could spin the guilt wheel any further. That afternoon, I walked into Alaric's office for the final paperwork. His assistant greeted me with a knowing smile. "He's got it ready for you." Inside, Alaric handed me the stack of documents: the real estate transfer, the final deed, and the legal confirmation of sale. No gray areas, no family clause, no footnote for forgiveness. He pointed to one line. "Sole owner, Brenna Wilson." "This protects you," he said. "No contest, no clawback. What you've done is clean. And final." I nodded. The air in my chest expanded in a way it hadn't for months. I left the office lighter, not because the burden was gone, but because I had finally set it down. By sunset, the ripple effects arrived. Marjorie texted, short and shaky. "We didn't realize what you were really holding up." Clive's voicemail was sharp-edged. "I can't believe you'd do this to your own parents." Zinnia's email came next, subject line. "Urgent." A screenshot of her rejected car loan application. Her message below. "Thanks a lot, sis." I archived each one, not out of spite, just as evidence. They thought love meant silence. I redefined it. Love now means limits. That evening, I brewed a pot of tea and sat on my porch with the real estate folder beside me. The house behind me was quiet. No footsteps stomping through shared rooms. No voice from a parent reminding me what I should have done. I opened a fresh journal page and wrote, "I protected my peace. That's not betrayal. That's inheritance." I thought silence would feel like exile, but it felt like air. Thursday came with no drama, no storm clouds, just a phone call I didn't expect, but probably should have. I was folding towels when the screen lit up. "Grandma Inez." I answered with a soft, "Hi." Her voice, low and steady as always, cut through like a warm knife. "They're staying here for now," she said. "Clive's folding napkins like a nervous trainee. Zinnia's not late, for once." I didn't say anything, just let the image sit. My father, whose hands had only known control, now fumbling with linens under fluorescent lights. My sister, who never met a clock she respected, showing up early for something. Then, Inez added, "They still talk like they're the ones who were betrayed." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "That sounds about right," I murmured. "You know," she said after a pause, "I told you a long time ago, don't confuse endurance with loyalty. Some chains were never meant to be worn." I smiled at the memory. I'd been 16, crying in her kitchen after yet another family holiday that left me invisible. She continued, "I'm proud of you. Not because you fought, because you finally walked away with your name still yours." I didn't cry. Not then. But something quiet shifted inside me. Later that night, I sat on my couch with a journal open on my lap, pen resting on the page. I hadn't written anything yet, just stared at the white space, letting the stillness hold me. Healing isn't loud, it's the absence of alarms. That thought settled into my chest, heavy in a different way than grief or anger. It was the weight of peace. The next afternoon, I went to the market to pick up a few things. Nothing special, just groceries for the weekend. As I stood in the checkout line, I overheard a woman behind me talking to her friend. "I paid the rent," she said, her tone tired. She took the credit, but I let her. Because that's what you do for family, right? I didn't turn around, didn't nod, or offer a knowing glance. I just stood still, absorbing it. I used to think dignity was earned, but sometimes it's just reclaimed. When I got home, there was a postcard waiting in my mailbox. No envelope, no return address. On the front was a watercolor of sunflowers in a field. On the back, in handwriting, I recognized immediately, it read, "Thinking of you. Mom." No apology, no ownership, just the echo of presence without substance. I didn't throw it away. I didn't reply either. I slid it into the drawer with my legal papers, next to the receipts and the contracts, where it belonged. A piece of the puzzle, not a peace offering. That evening, I made tea and pulled Inez's old notebook from the shelf. I hadn't opened it since before the sale closed. I flipped through the pages, her handwriting steady and elegant, notes about herbs, stories about her childhood, and occasional quotes she'd copied down from books or sermons. One line caught my eye, underlined twice in dark blue ink. People don't always mean to hurt you, but if they do it repeatedly, intention becomes irrelevant. I traced the words with my finger. I wasn't waiting for closure anymore. I had already closed the door and locked it from my side. 6 months later, I found myself walking through an old part of the neighborhood on a quiet Saturday morning. The breeze was light, and someone nearby was mowing a lawn. I didn't plan to go by the house, but my feet did what they wanted. I slowed as I passed. There it was, my former home. But now it looked nothing like the one I remembered. The shutters had been painted a soft blue. There were sunflowers blooming in the front beds, a red tricycle tipped near the walkway, and a golden retriever wagging its tail at the fence. A little boy squealed with delight from the porch, his parents laughing behind him. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I didn't need to. I didn't sell the house out of revenge. I sold it so I could stop living inside someone else's story. That night, back in my apartment, I turned off all the lights except the one over my desk. The room was quiet. My kind of quiet now. No overhead fans humming, no footsteps above me. Just me, a cup of peppermint tea, and a folder I hadn't opened since the sale. I opened my laptop and created a private channel. Then I clicked Upload. The file was simple. A 3-minute video slideshow. No music, no voiceover. Just photos, screenshots, emails, bank receipts, copies of texts, snippets of contracts. At the end of the clip, a single line appeared on screen. They took everything I gave, so I took back what was mine. I didn't post it, I didn't share it, but I saved it. Not for them, for me. For record. For the version of myself who once needed to prove she was telling the truth. On Monday, I taught a workshop at the community center. The topic? Financial boundaries, when love becomes leverage. There were 8 women in the room, all older than me, all nodding in painful recognition as I spoke. I didn't need applause. I just needed to make sure no one like me walked that road blind again. Through acquaintances, I sometimes heard what they were up to. Clive, it turned out, had started going to a local support group, not just sitting in silence, but talking. About control, about pride. Zinnia had picked up part-time shifts at a wellness shop, organic soaps, yoga mats, quiet hours. Marjorie had joined a women's group at a church, volunteered on Sundays. None of them reached out. None of them said, "I'm sorry." I received a letter one day, no return address, just my name and street handwritten in cursive I knew too well. I didn't open it. I placed it in a shoebox beside a few keepsakes I kept in the back of the closet. The deed to my home, the printout of the first bank account I opened alone, and a yellow sticky note that said, in my own handwriting, "No one can erase a name you own." That night, I sat on my porch as the sun dipped past the horizon. I pulled out my phone and recorded a short voice memo, just for me. Forgiveness isn't the door, it's the sidewalk. It doesn't take you back, it takes you past. I saved the file, then tucked the phone away and closed my eyes. This wasn't a happy ending. It was a quiet one. And that's what I always wanted. Quiet that stayed. Hi, my name's Aurelia, and this isn't just a story about a ripped dress. It's about the sister who smiled while tearing it, in front of 300 people. It's about the parents who called her the real star, even as I stood beside them, invisible. It's about the room full of guests who clapped for a lie they didn't care to question, until it unraveled in front of them. And when the truth came out, she didn't just fall from grace, she begged my husband, the man she once told me wasn't my league, to make it all go away. But what happens to a family when shame is staged and justice is silent but seen? Would you have stayed quiet? Or would you have done what I did? I arrived alone. Carnegie Mansion stood as proud as ever under the early spring sky. Classic, aloof, dressed in white light and old money. The doorman gave me a half smile as I passed. I clutched my evening bag tight, felt the chill graze my bare shoulders despite the long sleeves of the cream silk gown I'd chosen. The kind that whispers quiet power, not screams for attention. I knew I'd made the right choice when I stepped through the grand foyer and saw her, Callista. She was magnetic as ever, red satin dress, dramatic curls, eyes darting like she was scanning for cameras instead of people. My mother and father were already there, glasses raised, floating beside her like ornaments. My heels clicked once, twice, on the marble, and then I paused. Mom glanced my way, a flicker of recognition, a millisecond of possibility. But then she smiled wide. At Callista. "Sweetheart, you look like a movie star tonight. They're going to think you're the face of this whole event." Callista laughed like it was modesty, not confirmation. Dad leaned in for a kiss on her cheek. Mom linked arms with her. Just like that, the tableau was complete. A picture-perfect family moment. Except for me. 10 feet away, not a part of the frame. I pressed my lips together and stared at my phone screen, pretending to read a non-existent message. I wasn't surprised, I thought. But that didn't stop the sting. A daughter's place. Sometimes it's not even in the family photo, especially when she refuses to play the part written for her. At the check-in table, I gave my name. Dr. Aurelia Bennett, I said, softly but clearly. The woman behind the table nodded, rifled through the boxes, and handed me my name badge. Dr. A. Bennett, board chair. My work, my title. 10 years of research, meetings, policy revisions, and endless nights compiling the Foundation's bylaws. I slipped the badge into my clutch. I didn't want it to snag the silk. I made my way toward the main hall, where the lighting had been softened to a honeyed glow. My heels found the rhythm of the polished floors, and I took in the muted hum of champagne flutes, polite laughter, and curated compliments. That's when Callista found me. She slid up beside me like she'd been waiting. "Hey sis," she said, voice syrupy sweet, arms open for a hug. I hesitated, then leaned in. She squeezed tightly. Too tightly. "Good to see you here," she whispered into my ear. "You'll love the step and repeat wall. They're using the red backdrop. You know, the one that makes pale skin look washed out?" I smiled coolly. Then she was gone. 10 minutes later, applause erupted across the ballroom. I turned to look. The step and repeat was lit up, and standing under the spotlight, soaking it all in, was Callista, wearing my badge. Dr. A. Bennett, board chair. The MC's voice rang out. "And here's one of our shining supporters and leaders, Callista Bennett. Ladies and gentlemen." Cameras flashed like summer lightning. Reporters called her name. She posed, she laughed, she waved. I stood at the edge of the bar, holding a flute of sparkling water I hadn't tasted. It wasn't theft, it was choreography. One hug, one swipe, one flash. A decade of my work vanished behind someone else's lashes and lipstick. I thought of saying something, but then I remembered something even more important. Saying it doesn't always make people hear you. So I watched and waited. The crowd parted around her like she was royalty, and in that moment, she was. No one questioned it, not a single person. I took a breath, steadying myself. Later that evening, as I moved toward the ballroom entrance, I caught a fragment of a conversation. My mother's voice, soft and pointed. She was always the star. Even Malcolm saw it first. My steps faltered. Not because it hurt. I had grown used to that. But because even after all these years, she still believed it. I didn't stop walking when I heard her say it. I didn't look back. I didn't give her the satisfaction. But I felt it, like a pin pressed to the center of my spine. Not sharp enough to wound, but deep enough to remind me I'd never quite been enough for her. Not bright enough, not loud enough, not Callista. Inside the ballroom, the air had thickened with floral perfume and the rising pitch of clinking glassware. Guests shuffled between stations. Cheese towers, dessert platters, signature cocktails lined up in rows of sparkling temptation. The lighting was lower now, amber and soft, like it was trying to convince us the night still had warmth left to offer. I hovered near the dessert table, more for the illusion of purpose than any desire to indulge. I wasn't hungry. I was watching, strategically, subtly, learning who was watching who. That's when I heard her. "You went with the sapphire, huh?" Callista's voice, smooth and intentional, floated past my ear before she did. She stopped just beside me, not facing me, but speaking loudly enough for nearby guests to catch every word. "Bold choice," she added, dipping her fork into a raspberry tart. "Thought you hated drawing attention. Or is it different now that you married into a bank account?" The woman next to her stifled a laugh behind a flute of Prosecco. Another one raised an eyebrow, but didn't look surprised. I turned my head slowly, meeting her gaze head-on. She looked pleased with herself, like a cat who'd pawed the goldfish bowl just enough to make it ripple. "That's the problem with you, Cal," I said, letting the words rest, low and steady. "You think visibility is the same as power." She didn't reply, but the smile that once curled across her lips fell, just slightly. Enough for me to notice. Enough for the woman behind her to look away, unsure whose side she wanted to be seen on. I walked off before she could reclaim the moment. Half an hour later, I found myself passing the reception desk again, on my way toward the south corridor. I was hoping to step outside, breathe something that didn't taste like money or vanity. But then I heard my mother's voice. Low, intimate, like she thought the hallway would shield her. "She always struggles with nights like this," she said to a woman I recognized but couldn't quite place. Tall, elegant, name on every society page. Fiona, I realized. Fiona Marks, the columnist whose op-eds could kill or crown a career. "Too many people, too much elegance," Mom went on. "Callista thrives in this world. Aurelia just tries to survive it." Fiona hesitated. "But she's the co-founder of the STEM initiative, isn't she?" My mother smiled faintly. That polished, practiced expression that always said too much without sounding like anything at all. "Yes," she said. "But sometimes it's better to let the spotlight rest on the one who knows how to hold it." That did it. It wasn't the words. It was the certainty in her voice, the way she spoke like it was fact, not opinion. Like this was the family memo I'd just never received. I stepped back, letting a few guests pass between us, and pulled out my phone. Not to check anything, but to center myself. They'd written me out of the narrative without even blinking. Not out of malice, not even jealousy, out of preference. That was worse. I returned to the ballroom with a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in a long time. Not the quiet of someone defeated, but the clarity of someone done waiting for rescue. Malcolm had asked me once why I rarely spoke up when my sister overstepped. I'd said, "Because it doesn't matter to them." I was wrong. It hadn't mattered because I hadn't made it matter. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the room like silk dropped from the rafters. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses paused mid-air. The MC stepped onto the stage, beaming like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. "And to help introduce tonight's keynote speaker," he announced, "please welcome the Bennett family's shining star, Callista Bennett." The spotlight clicked on. She stepped out, smiling like she owned the air we all breathed. And maybe she did, but not for much longer. I stepped outside the ballroom, into a quieter corridor that curved toward a balcony no one used unless they needed air or escape. The light changed out here. Less gold, more slate, cooler on the skin, easier on the nerves. The air was different too. It didn't carry perfume or laughter, just the faint scent of rain still clinging to the stone. I gripped the railing, fingers resting on cold metal. I couldn't see Callista from here, but I could hear the echo of her voice inside. The crowd was still reacting to her, eating out of her palm like trained animals. They always did. It was strange what that moment dredged up. Not anger, not even jealousy. Memory. A summer afternoon. I was 16. Our living room was buzzing with women. Mom's garden club, bridge friends, someone from her book circle. Callista had just been accepted to Columbia. They were celebrating her before she even finished high school. I walked in holding a folder. I'd gotten an early internship at the city library. Nothing glamorous, but it meant something to me. I opened my mouth to share. Then I heard my mother. "Honestly," she said, wine glass in hand, "we didn't plan for another after Callista. But what do? You adjust. She's a sweet girl, but not the same cloth." The room chuckled politely. Not maliciously, just in agreement. I didn't drop the folder. I didn't say a word. I turned and walked back down the hall and shut my bedroom door. It's funny how you forget what day of the week it was, but never the exact words. Back then, I told myself it didn't matter, that I wasn't supposed to be heard in every room, that doing the work quietly had its own dignity. But tonight, hearing Callista introduced with my title, while I stood with my name stripped from the program, it wasn't just history repeating. It was proof that they had never stopped choosing her. I looked out over the garden, the lights from the ballroom flickering on the stone below. I'd helped fund the restoration of those steps, wrote the grant myself, but my name was nowhere near the plaque. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. What I felt was colder, older, the kind of pain that wasn't fresh, but foundational. Behind me, the doors creaked slightly. I turned, expecting a waiter, but it was one of the younger foundation assistants. Chloe, I think her name was. She was maybe 24, trying to play it cool in borrowed heels. She hesitated, then stepped closer. "I just wanted to say," she whispered, "you're the reason I donated, not her. People notice the real work, even if your family doesn't." My mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Not because I was shocked, because I believed her. I stepped back into the ballroom just in time for the lights to rise again. Dinner had been served, drinks refreshed, and laughter renewed like someone had hit the reset button. I returned to my table, quietly, as always, while Callista's voice echoed from the stage behind me. I didn't look. I didn't need to. I could map the rhythm of her tone without turning around. Bright, falsely modest, deliberately disarming. Every time she paused for a laugh or looked coyly at the camera, I could tell. She wasn't just performing for the audience, she was rewriting the entire narrative. Then the lights dimmed again, and the large screen behind the stage flickered to life. A montage began, footage of community STEM camps, young girls coding, building solar-powered prototypes. Voices layered softly beneath it, talking about progress and purpose. I knew those faces. I remembered every girl, every weekend I gave up, every grant I'd fought to get funded. This was my work, my hands, my team, my fight. But I wasn't in the video. Then, as the last voice faded out, a final image filled the screen. Callista, crouched beside a group of smiling girls, one hand on a robot, the other holding a child's shoulder like she'd coached them through rocket science herself. And beneath it, the words, "Brought to life by Callista Bennett, advocate, innovator, visionary." Applause exploded. I didn't stand. I didn't clap. I didn't blink. The MC's voice rang out with confidence. What a radiant symbol of how grace and beauty can also mean bold leadership. I placed my fork down precisely with both hands. My water glass stayed full. My mouth stayed closed. In that moment, I didn't want to be seen. I wanted the lie to stop breathing. I took a breath, steadying my heart against the rising pulse in my neck. Across the room, at the VIP table, I spotted Callista holding court. She laughed in a way that only people who've never worked hard for anything can laugh, loose and loud, like nothing could touch her. Then, casually, she reached for her phone and held it up for her table to see. "It's a throwback," she said, grinning. "Wait for it." A short clip played, projected directly from her screen. It was grainy, jerky, the kind of footage someone took in high school when they were trying to be clever. I was in it, 16, mid-argument with a teacher over a literature assignment I'd challenged. My voice was sharp, my body language defiant. I looked fierce, but out of context, I looked unhinged. The caption scrawled across the bottom of the video. She always had a strong tone. Laughter floated over the table like cheap perfume. One woman, someone from a media outlet, glanced at me, then quickly away, embarrassed for both of us. Callista caught my eye and raised her glass slightly, toasting me with a wink. My fingers curled under the table. I didn't clench them, I didn't move, but something in me clicked. Some people use knives, others use a lens. The damage feels the same. I rose from my chair, calm and measured, and stepped out of the dining area. As I walked, I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. My fingers moved with deliberate grace, opening a message thread I hadn't touched in months. I typed one line. "How quickly can you retrieve copyright proof for unpublished footage?" Then I hit send. I didn't look back. By the time I reached the rooftop lounge, the cold had settled just enough to feel it in my collarbones. Not unpleasant, just bracing. The sky above Manhattan had turned the kind of blue that happens right before the night finally gives up and becomes black. Below, the din of the ballroom felt distant, detached, like the noise belonged to someone else's life. Here, people weren't dancing, they were dealing, power in cocktail dresses, secrets exchanged in half-whispers over stemless wine glasses. This was where image became legacy, and reputation wasn't earned. It was traded. I found a quiet corner near a heating lamp and leaned against the marble railing. Before I could exhale, a woman I didn't recognize approached. Small frame, tablet in one hand, press badge on the other. "Dr. Bennett?" she asked, her tone clipped but not unkind. I nodded. She leaned in slightly. "I was hoping to confirm something, off record of course," which meant very much on the record. "Callista mentioned," she continued, "that you had a medical procedure in your 20s, something to do with pregnancy complications." She said it lightly, like we were discussing a canceled hair appointment, like it was hers to know, hers to question, hers to define. And in that moment, it became clear. Callista wasn't just rewriting the past anymore. She was weaponizing it. I didn't flinch. Instead, I pulled out my clutch, unclasped it carefully, and retrieved a folded sheet of thick paper. The notary seal still shimmered faintly under the rooftop light. I handed it to the reporter. "It's confirmation of an egg donation I made when I was 26, I said, calm. "A friend needed help after chemo. There was no pregnancy, no trap, just science and compassion." She blinked. "I don't care if you use it," I added. "Or if you don't, I didn't do it for press, and I won't apologize for my body." She looked at the document, then back at me. Her voice softened. "Thank you for your time." I gave a small nod, then turned before she could find a way to make the moment hers. Inside, the mood had shifted slightly. The music remained light, but there was a tremor under it now, a buzz that hadn't been there before. Something had been said, or maybe just something had been seen. Callista was holding court again, laughing a little too hard, her group a little too rehearsed. I knew the signs. She was overperforming. When Callista turned into a show, it meant she was deflecting. I made my way toward the far end of the lounge, where a few high-top tables gave a view of the skyline. Before I reached it, I heard her voice again, louder this time, for effect. "Aurelia always found her purpose a bit late in life," she said, swirling her wine. "But hey, marrying Malcolm? That's a strategy, and clearly it's paying off. The laughter was immediate. But one woman didn't laugh. She spotted me first, standing in the fringe of the circle, coat draped over one shoulder, glass untouched in my hand. Her smile faltered. Then Callista saw me. Our eyes met. I stepped into the center without hesitation. "You're right," I said clearly. "I did choose stability, over spotlight, over performative drama. Malcolm didn't marry me for the headlines. He married me for the quiet rooms, the work, the things no one claps for." I let the silence hold for a beat. "He married me," I said, "for substance, which, as you can see tonight, is in short supply." No one moved. Then, somewhere near the bar, a glass clinked against another. Soft. Intentional. A few heads nodded. A quiet ripple moved through the group. Not thunderous, but enough to shift the air. Callista's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I didn't wait for her to recover. I walked past her, measured steps, no urgency, and let my fingers brush against the silver plaque mounted near the terrace exit. My name, engraved in clean serif font, Dr. Aurelia Bennett, endowment chair. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just whispered, "They never needed to see me to know who built this." I moved back inside slowly, letting the door close behind me with a soft click. The hallway leading to the ballroom had thinned, waitstaff clearing empty glasses, couples pausing to check lipstick or loosen tight ties. I kept my pace even, nodding politely when necessary, but not stopping. As I entered the main space, the vibe had shifted. Gone was the earlier glow of admiration. Now it was a hum of curiosity, eyes darting, lips murmuring, phones up. The press had crept in closer. Lights weren't as soft anymore. I could feel the heat of attention without anyone calling my name. I walked past the edge of the lounge and paused when I heard her voice. Too familiar, too casual. "She's come far," Callista said to a man holding a camera rig, her tone falsely tender. "A few years ago, we weren't even sure she'd make it through recovery. But healing stories are powerful, right?" The man, young, sharp, a blogger with influence, nodded like he'd been handed gold. My body didn't move, but inside, something snapped like overstretched wire. Recovery? There had never been rehab. No therapy stint, no public breakdown. I'd had burnout once, yes, but it hadn't been a secret, and it hadn't required reinvention. What Callista had done in 10 words was worse than gossip. It was calculated storytelling. It was a smear wearing pearls. Then, like she'd sensed me, she turned. Our eyes met. And she smiled. Not the smile of a sister. The smile of a predator who just challenged you to blink first. I didn't. I stepped back quietly, took out my phone, and typed one line to Malcolm. "Prep legal for defamation exposure if this goes public, but don't act yet." Because it wasn't about my past anymore. It was about who got to write it. I headed toward the media alcove to retrieve a charger when I heard my name again, this time from a foundation assistant. "Dr. Bennett, there's someone at the investor table asking for you." I made my way there without hesitation, and then I saw him, Ryan Keel, of all people, all. He stood just as I arrived, like he'd been expecting this scene. His hair was shorter now, more controlled. But the grin? The grin hadn't aged a day. "Still hate Cabernet," he said, grinning. "I remember you tried it once. Threw up in my sink." Callista laughed from 3 seats down. Too loud, too fake. A man in a navy suit chuckled softly, unsure of what was happening. I nodded once. "Nice of you to fly in just to remind me of your plumbing," I said, letting my tone stay even. Ryan blinked. Then I turned to the others. "Let me know if he pitches crypto. He's due for a pivot." Laughter broke through the tension. Not wild, but clear enough to separate us. A woman at the end of the table smiled behind her glass. Another looked away, embarrassed for him. Callista stiffened. I didn't bother staying. I turned and left, the sound of my heels muted by the carpet, but not by what I left behind. Halfway down the hallway, I paused at the edge of the catering corridor and checked my phone. A new message. Unknown number. There's a video Callista doesn't want anyone to see. I have it. Meet me near the valet exit. Midnight. I stared at the screen, then slipped the phone into my pocket and kept walking. It wasn't fear I felt. It was momentum. I kept moving, back through the glowing corridors of the mansion. It was almost midnight, but the night refused to wind down. The energy had shifted. Less celebration, more calculation. It was the hour when reputations linger longer than the drinks, and the wrong whisper could last longer than the party. The ballroom had thinned just enough to make space between people, but not enough to escape the ever-hovering cameras. I passed a mirrored column and caught my reflection. Still composed. Still in control. But I could feel the sharpness in my steps now, like something had hardened inside me. Like I had finally accepted that this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a pattern, and it needed to end. Near the networking lounge, I spotted Callista with her phone out. That was never good news. She had it angled perfectly, selfie mode, catching the soft backdrop of the chandelier glow and curated laughter. I recognized the tone of her voice even before I heard the words. "Hey guys," she purred into the stream. "Just thought I'd give you a peek at the magic tonight. Such a beautiful event. Oh, look!" She panned her phone slightly to where I was walking past in the background. Some people show up to support, some just linger. But hey, let's give the quiet achievers a moment too. I didn't stop, but the damage was already live. I caught two guests pausing mid-conversation, eyes flitting between the screen and me. A reporter nearby raised his phone like he'd found gold. A notification pinged from the corner of someone else's feed. Is that the sister who married the billionaire? She looks uncomfortable. No, I didn't look uncomfortable. I looked done. I turned slightly and met the gaze of the camera, just for a second. Long enough to let her know I saw what she was doing, and I wasn't blinking anymore. She thought her audience was an army, but even mobs can be silenced when the truth is loud enough. I continued toward the bar, passing through clusters of small conversations, laughter that tasted like champagne and insincerity. Then, another flash of her voice behind me, louder this time, coming from one of her friends. "Careful," the woman said with a drunken chuckle. "She's going to ask us to rate her tray-carrying form next." Laughter erupted. Too loud, too rehearsed. Callista chimed in, her voice syrupy and sharp. "No, she'll probably file a patent for it." That's when a group of them, maybe 5 or 6, started mock-walking in a circle. Arms tucked in, eyes cast down, mimicking the way I moved through events with quiet efficiency. The lounge was suddenly too quiet and too loud at once. Then, out of nowhere, a teenage girl stepped forward. "Enough," she said, clear and unwavering. The room froze. "You're not edgy, you're mean." Callista's smile dropped for half a second. The girl stepped back, unsure whether to laugh or apologize. I looked at the girl. No older than 16, probably a donor's daughter in a borrowed dress and borrowed confidence. But in that moment, she was braver than anyone in that room had been all night. I nodded once to her. Not for her sake, for mine. Because the first crack never starts with a blow. It starts with someone else seeing it too. Callista recovered fast, of course. Laughed like it was all a joke that got away from them. But her eyes met mine, and I saw it. Not guilt, not shame, fear. I turned on my heel, leaving her in that silence, and headed toward the exit. The corridor smelled of lilies and waxed floors. Everything too polished, too curated. A place built to cover things, not confront them. At the door, a valet in a dark jacket stepped toward me quietly. He didn't speak. He simply extended his hand with a small envelope. Inside, a flash drive. No note. Just 3 words handwritten across the inner flap. Watch before dawn. Then decide what to burn. I didn't stop moving, not until I reached a quiet corner near the back entrance where no one lingered anymore. I slipped the flash drive into my phone using the tiny adapter I always kept in my clutch. Old habit from managing foundation press decks, not revenge fantasies. But life had a way of redefining usefulness. The file loaded quickly. No title screen, no dramatic music, just raw footage. A close-up shot, from above. Callista, in her silver gown. Behind me. She reached out, calmly, deliberately, and found the edge of my dress, right where the fabric was double-stitched to hold weight. She didn't yank yet, just pinched it, curled it between her fingers, then pulled, sharply. The video froze at that exact moment. The frame captured my shock. Her smirk. I didn't flinch, didn't press rewind. I just let it sit there in my palm like a truth too long silenced. It wasn't an accident. It was theater. I glanced up. The final toasts were beginning. The crowd had reassembled. Champagne flutes glittered under the chandeliers. Callista stood near the dance floor, surrounded again. They always surrounded her. This time, I didn't hesitate. I walked across the room, my heels striking the marble harder than before. Intentional. I passed the stage tech near the AV booth and handed him my phone. "Project this," I said. "No volume needed." He blinked but didn't ask questions. Years in event work teaches obedience under pressure. The lights dimmed as another speech wrapped up. A guest raised a glass. Someone laughed too loud, and then the screen behind the stage lit up. The video played, no title, no introduction, just her. Pulling my dress. The room went dead silent. Gasps. Then silence again. Callista stepped forward, as if to protest. But mid-step, the seam of my gown tore slightly at the side. Not from the video. From her original tug. Someone screamed. Not in fear, but recognition. She did that on purpose. Flashbulbs erupted like a storm. One person dropped their glass. Another whispered something too fast to catch. But I stood still, center stage now. No microphone, no applause. Just truth. I walked up slowly, took the auxiliary cord from the AV assistant, and disconnected my phone. The screen went black. My voice didn't rise. I didn't perform. I didn't lecture. I just said, "This is what envy looks like when it runs out of lies." No one clapped. They didn't need to. Because when a room sees the thing you've been saying all along, silence is louder than standing ovations. Callista stood frozen, her hand still half raised, like she didn't know whether to explain or escape. No one moved toward her. She turned slowly and looked at me. But I didn't meet her eyes this time. I wasn't here to convince her of anything anymore. Malcolm stepped forward from the back. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at me. He looked at the crowd. "I'll handle the legal side," he said, voice clear, measured. "But tonight, you all witnessed the truth." And just like that, the air in the room changed. Not because of him, but because of what had finally been seen. I returned just before sunrise. The mansion no longer shimmered. It sat heavy in the morning haze, like a house that had finally confessed to its own secrets. The courtyard was empty, save for two valets nursing coffee from paper cups, their jackets wrinkled and their eyes tracking no one in particular. Inside, the lounge had been stripped of its sparkle. Chairs stacked, centerpieces boxed, the scent of leftover roses clinging to everything like memory. I wasn't here to linger. I just needed my folder, the one I'd left at the foundation booth near the registration table. But as I crossed the now bare ballroom, I noticed the staff glancing up at me, their conversations stalling mid-sentence. Not rudely, not even curiously, just differently. The hush wasn't cold. It wasn't polite either. It was a kind of recognition I hadn't earned from them before. One young man muttered, just loud enough for me to catch, "People finally know who the real star was." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I wasn't looking for applause anymore. I was looking for peace. Near the side doors, a tech assistant was packing equipment into a hard case. He looked up, then hesitated. "Dr. Bennett?" I nodded. He pulled something from his pocket, a flash drive with a bright red label. "There's something you should hear," he said. "From earlier. It was recorded accidentally. Lapel mic. We always keep the raw feeds for syncing. I took it gently. He added, already online. I found a chair near the corner, popped the drive into my phone, and slid on my headphones. The audio clicked on, muffled movement, background noise, and then her. Callista. No, pull harder near the waist seam, she said, laughing under her breath. If it tears there, she'll think it's her own weight. Trust me, the worse she looks, the better I shine. My breath didn't hitch. My hands didn't tremble. What I felt was beyond betrayal. It was clarity. The hashtag had already begun trending. Shakir ripped by blood. I stared at the words on screen, the comment threads unraveling beneath them. Some were cruel. Most were stunned. But one simply read, she planned it. She planned it all. And for once, the world believed them. Not me. Her. A soft knock interrupted the storm in my earbuds. One of the event volunteers stood there, holding a slim envelope with my name written in pen. I opened it slowly. Inside was a handwritten letter on thick cream paper. I laughed when she mocked you. I didn't stop her. But you stood taller than all of us. I'm sorry. You taught me something we weren't brave enough to learn. No name, just Marlene, table 6. I folded it carefully and placed it inside the flap of my binder. Not for revenge, not for memory. Just to know that someone, somewhere, had the courage to own their silence. It didn't undo what happened, but it acknowledged the wound. And that's where real healing always begins. I stood, gathered the last of my things, and took one long look around the ballroom. The same chandeliers, the same velvet ropes. But everything felt different now. Not because they changed, because I had. As I stepped out into the early light, my phone vibrated. A new message from Malcolm. Board is meeting at 10. Your name is on every agenda. I smiled, not because it was unexpected, but because it was earned. The elevator opened directly into the boardroom on the 28th floor. Glass walls, chrome finishes, polished walnut table, all designed to intimidate without saying a word. But I wasn't here to be impressed. I was here to be clear. Malcolm was already seated at the head, hands clasped, eyes unreadable. The rest of the room filled quickly. Legal counsel to the left, media advisors to the right. A few family stakeholders looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. I walked in without waiting for an introduction. No one stood, but no one spoke either. The VP of Legal tapped a folder against the table twice and began. Due to recent evidence of defamation, reputational harm, and intentional sabotage during a flagship philanthropic event under our brand, this meeting has been convened for emergency decisions regarding personnel and public positioning. She clicked a remote, and two screens behind her came to life. One showed the dress-ripping footage. The other, the audio recording of Callista's premeditated instructions. No, pull harder near the waist seam. The room didn't gasp this time. They already knew. Callista appeared on the large center monitor. Video linked in from wherever she had chosen to hole up. Her hair was pulled back, lips bare of gloss, eyes calculating. I assume I'm not allowed to speak? She said with a forced laugh. Malcolm didn't even look at her. He addressed the room. She's not here to defend herself, he said. She's here to hear the consequences. He gestured toward me without turning. This company was built on integrity, and last night my wife restored it. I didn't blink. I didn't need to. He continued. The public trusts what we build, what we support, who we stand behind, and we stand behind her. Silence. The kind that doesn't ask for applause, just agreement. The general counsel slid a document toward me. The signature page. Malcolm had already signed. 2 trustees had signed. 1 blank remained. Effective immediately, he said. Callista Bennett is removed from all legacy-facing initiatives, PR duties, and succession planning related to the Bennett Family Trust. Oversight of all philanthropic divisions will fall solely under Dr. Aurelia Bennett. A click echoed as I signed. 1 pen stroke, 1 line, 1 door closed. Callista's voice buzzed through the speakers, thin and small now. "You're ruining me for one bad night," I finally spoke. "You ruined you," I said, voice steady. "I just made sure people saw it." The video feed cut out. No one tried to bring it back. The meeting moved on: action items, media strategies, succession updates. It was oddly procedural, almost clinical. And yet, I felt every second settle into place, like bricks forming something stronger. When it adjourned, the room stood slowly, gathering phones, folders, reputations. As I moved toward the exit, one of the senior board members, Reed Hammond, a man who hadn't said 10 words to me in 5 years, stepped closer. "There's a keynote opening at Aspen," he said quietly. "Policy forum. They're asking for someone unshakable." I raised an eyebrow. "And you said?" He smiled faintly. "Told them I'd ask the one woman who knows how to steady a storm without raising her voice." I nodded once, polite. Nothing smug, just calm. "Let them send details," I said. "And next time, don't wait so long to ask." 3 days after the boardroom meeting, I returned to something resembling a routine. The media had already shifted its attention to the next scandal. Social feeds that once buzzed with hashtags and outrage now circled back to vacation photos, brunch posts, and political hot takes. The world spun on. But inside my apartment, things moved slower. Intentionally so. My home office in Soho overlooked a quiet street where the honking died down after 4 p.m., and the light filtered through the sheer curtains like it respected boundaries. I sat at my desk, reviewing logistics for the foundation tour, sipping tea that had gone lukewarm hours ago. That's when the knock came. 3 soft taps. Not urgent, not rehearsed. I opened the door, and there she was. Callista. No entourage, no gloss. Her hair pulled back in a careless knot, her face bare. Even her clothes, a wrinkled cardigan, jeans that didn't try, spoke louder than her lips did. She didn't wait to be invited in. She walked past me, dropped her handbag on the edge of my reading chair, and stood in the center of the room like she wasn't sure what to hold on to. "I didn't think it would go this far," she said finally, her voice cracking. I've always been the one they noticed." I didn't speak. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry for what I said, for what I let them say, for what I made them believe." She sat down, not because I offered, but because her legs gave in. I remained standing. "I believe you," I said quietly, "but it doesn't change what it cost me." Her eyes met mine, glassier than I'd ever seen them. Not angry, not manipulative, just tired. "So what now?" she asked, a note of desperation breaking through. "You just cut me out?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lean forward. "No," I said. "You did that when you tore more than my dress. I'm just not sewing it back together for you." She let out a breath that sounded like surrender. Then, without another word, she picked up her bag, walked to the door, and opened it herself. The hallway light fell across the floor, like a line neither of us was going to cross again. She paused, just long enough for me to see the part of her that wasn't ready to go. Then she stepped over it. The door clicked shut behind her. Soft, final. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I sat down at my desk, picked up a pen, and finished reviewing the travel schedule. There, on top of the folder, was a note from Malcolm. "The Foundation launch tour is yours to lead. First stop, D.C. You were always the one they'd follow." The ballroom in D.C. was nothing like Carnegie Mansion, but it didn't need to be. It didn't shimmer with generational wealth or whisper history through marble columns. It was newer, sleek, modern, unapologetically practical. It was built for ideas, not illusions. And tonight, it was mine. 2 weeks had passed since the board meeting. The media storm had mostly quieted. Callista's name was still circulating in think pieces and industry newsletters, usually as a cautionary tale. But I'd stopped reading them. There was no satisfaction in watching someone fall apart. What mattered now was what came next. My steps echoed softly against the polished floor as I moved toward the stage, heart steady beneath the white gown I'd chosen carefully, intentionally, the same one she tore, not replaced, not hidden, repaired. The seam was still there, a faint line running diagonally across the left hip, but now it glimmered faintly with gold stitching. It didn't try to disappear. It leaned into the damage, owned it. A few guests noticed as I walked past. Some whispered. One woman nodded, her eyes wet. Not pity, something else. Recognition, maybe. The lights dimmed, and I stepped onto the stage. My name flashed across the screen behind me. Dr. Aurelia Bennett, founder, Quiet Power STEM Initiative. Applause rose, warm, unforced, real. I approached the mic and adjusted it slightly. Then I looked out at the room. Mostly women, mostly tired. Teachers, policymakers, first-generation students. The kind of crowd that doesn't care what label's on your heels, only what you're standing for. I cleared my throat, spoke slowly. 2 weeks ago, the world saw a video. A dress torn in public. A moment that was never meant to happen, but did. And in that moment, many people focused on the rip. I paused, let the silence settle. But what stayed with me wasn't the tear. It was what came after, the stitch, the choice to mend instead of replace. Because dignity doesn't depend on their silence, it lives in our voice. The screen behind me changed. Side by side, the viral photo from the gala and a new image, the plaque from the foundation wall, my name etched cleanly beneath it. The audience exhaled as one. And then came the clapping. Not polite, not forced. True. Somewhere near the third row, a girl no older than 15 wiped her eyes. I locked eyes with her for half a second, then looked away, so she could hold that moment as hers. Backstage, after the lights cooled and the seats emptied, I found a small envelope tucked under my speech notes. No postage, no return address. Inside was a letterhead from the Aspen Institute, just 2 sentences. You are confirmed to lead our upcoming global policy panel. We need your clarity now more than ever. Beneath it, in blue ink, someone had handwritten, "They were right. You are unshakable." Before I could fold it away, one of the interns ran up, breathless. "Dr. Bennett, do you have a second? There's someone who wants to meet you." I followed her around the corner to the back gallery. A cluster of students was waiting, notebooks clutched, eyes wide. One girl stepped forward. Her voice trembled. "I want to grow up to be the kind of woman who speaks with her eyes first, just like you." I didn't correct her, didn't tell her how often I'd failed at that exact thing. Instead, I touched her shoulder lightly. "Then you already are." As I gathered my coat and stepped into the night, my phone buzzed. A text from Malcolm. "Come home, the world sees you now." But I always did. I stood for a moment under the DC sky, the wind tugging gently at my coat, the seam of my gown brushing against my leg like a quiet reminder. Some things tear, but the right ones, the ones built with purpose, they hold. Hi, I'm Astrid. And no, I didn't drop out of school to follow a boyfriend across Europe. That's just what my mother told the neighbors. What really happened? I worked nights, ate instant noodles behind restaurant dumpsters, passed out on shift, no one came. Meanwhile, my sister? She was clinking champagne glasses in LA, on my money. At Christmas, Dad asked if the $1,500 a month was helping. I said, "What money?" The next morning, 83 missed calls. Turns out, Mom rerouted every cent of my trust fund to support my sister's dream. Now tell me, how do you survive being erased by the people who raised you? It was 11:45 on a Tuesday night, and the buzzing fluorescent lights in the back of the diner felt sharper than usual. I'd been on my feet for nearly 14 hours straight, 2 double shifts back to back, and the silence behind the storage shelves was the only thing keeping me from unraveling. I crouched down between boxes of canned chili and overstocked ketchup, tearing open a cup of instant noodles. No microwave. I poured lukewarm tap water from the break room faucet and waited. 5 minutes, maybe 6. It didn't matter. Half-cooked was still better than nothing. Steam barely rose from the cup as I shoveled it in, each bite more about motion than taste. My legs ached. My fingers were raw from wiping down tables. My shoes, worn out and split at the soles, let in cold from the kitchen floor. Nobody noticed I was gone. Nobody ever really noticed when I was there. "Table 6 needs a refill," my coworker called out. I stood too fast. The next thing I remember was the sharp clang of the metal tray hitting tile, and then darkness. When I came to, the world was washed in pale hospital lights, the beep of machines, the scratchy fabric of a hospital gown, an IV in my arm. My mouth was dry, throat sore, and everything about the room felt temporary, as if I had been dropped into someone else's problem. A nurse leaned over me. "Do you have someone we can call?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I blinked. Then finally, no. Not because I didn't have a family, but because they wouldn't come. When the nurse left, I reached for my phone. 1% battery. I tapped in my passcode. No missed calls. No messages. I opened my texts anyway, just in case something had come through that hadn't notified. Nothing. Then, a ping. A text from Mom. "Glad you're doing okay? Could you send the name of that skincare line you liked? Celine wants to try it." A second one followed almost instantly. "Don't forget to eat." I stared at the screen. The silence in my chest was louder than any heart monitor. Not pain, not anger, just an emptiness I'd grown familiar with, a vacuum where comfort used to live. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. There was no question in her texts, just a performance of care, sent from God knows where. Probably a spa, maybe even mid-massage. The last time I spoke to her, really spoke, was 2 months ago. I'd asked about help with tuition. Nothing big, just enough to get me through the last part of the semester. "You're an adult now," she'd said. "You're supposed to manage." Manage. Like managing meant eating dry cereal for dinner, or doing laundry at 2 a.m. at the cheapest laundromat in the city, or working back-to-back shifts while studying for physiology exams because rent didn't pay itself. The nurse returned, handed me a hospital-issue charger. I thanked her, plugged in my phone, let it boot. Out of habit, I opened Instagram. The first story that loaded, Celine, smiling into the camera, jazz music in the background. She was sipping something golden, sparkling. The location tagged, West Hollywood Rooftop Brunch. Her caption read, "No better way to start the day. Thanks, Mom, for always supporting the dream." A cream Dior dress hugged her frame. Her nails were freshly manicured. Her hair, blown out and glossy, bounced as she laughed into the camera. I looked down at my taped wrist. The IV tugged a little as I shifted. Still no tears. I tapped the 3 dots on the post. Saved. Not because I wanted to keep it, because I needed to remember. 2 days later, I stood in front of my mini fridge with the door open, letting the dim light spill out onto the tile floor. Inside, a shriveled half-lemon, an expired container of Greek yogurt, and 1 sad bottle of mustard. That was it. The cold didn't bother me. The emptiness did. The radiator in the corner clanged like it was choking on air, and the window by my desk let in a draft no matter how tightly I sealed it. I'd been home from the hospital for 48 hours. No calls, no knock on my door, no, "Hey, how are you?" from my mom or anyone else who claimed to be family. I plugged in my phone charger, sat on the bed, and opened my email. 1 new message. Not from anyone I cared about. Just the university's billing department reminding me my fall tuition balance was still unpaid. I closed the laptop without replying. Not because I didn't plan to pay, but because I had no idea how I would. To distract myself, I scrolled through the freelance boards I bookmarked. Ghostwriting gigs, editing jobs, virtual tutoring, anything that could keep me afloat. While tabs loaded, I reflexively opened Instagram again. Celine's face was the first thing I saw. She was seated on a rooftop, gold light catching her cheekbones just right. A glass of mimosa sparkled in her hand. croissants, fruit, avocado toast laid out in front of her, like a magazine spread. Same cream Dior dress. Her caption? No better way to start the day. Thanks, Mom, for always supporting the dream. I watched the reel loop twice before recording my screen, just in case it disappeared later. I let out a low, stunned laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so precise in its betrayal. Celine didn't just forget to mention me. She crafted a world where I didn't exist. And maybe worse than thinking she earned all this was knowing she thought I didn't. I stared at the screen, then pulled open my saved emails. 1 month ago, I'd reached out to Mom asking for help buying a secondhand anatomy textbook. Mine had been ruined by spilled coffee during an overnight cram session. I'd attached a screenshot of the listing, $42, used, highlighted already, but readable. She replied 2 days later. That's a luxury, Astrid. You'll have to make do. A luxury. I leaned back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought about that word. Luxury, for me, meant a used textbook I couldn't afford. Dream, for Celine, meant champagne brunches on rooftops. I didn't even know what kind of person you had to become to not see the difference. Later that afternoon, I logged into my student insurance portal to check if I could get follow-up coverage from the hospital. The login failed. I tried again. Same error. I called the school's admin office. After being transferred twice, a woman named Janine finally picked up. Hi, yes, I'm trying to access my insurance information. Let me pull you up, she said, typing loudly. Looks like your policy was canceled in July. Canceled? Yeah, request came from a parent file. Something about financial consolidation. I didn't respond right away. My throat had gone dry. I asked her to email me the documentation. When the email came in, it was there in plain text. My mother had submitted the cancellation form. No replacement coverage. No warning. I didn't cry. Again, not out of strength, but because crying would have meant I was surprised. Instead, I opened a new spreadsheet on my laptop. I titled the first column, Request, the second, Response. Then, Celine's posts, bank statement dates, and excuse used. Row 1, textbook, that's a luxury. Brunch photo, $3,500 withdrawal. She's delicate. Row 2, insurance lapse, financial consolidation. Paris announcement post, $3,500 withdrawal. She's networking. I kept going. Every slight, every dismissal, every financial redirection that mirrored one of Selena's upgrades. At the bottom of the sheet, I wrote, Mom's silence isn't absence, it's redirection. And that was the first time I understood. This wasn't a matter of miscommunication. This was a system, built quietly, operated efficiently, and I had been edited out of it. I wasn't angry, not yet. That came later when I realized who they chose to protect. A week passed in a fog of cheap coffee and unpaid bills. I kept my head down, went to class, did what needed doing. I moved through days like a machine that had forgotten how to rest. That Monday, I checked my inbox in the campus library. I was half expecting another late fee notice. Instead, the subject line read, FAFSA, Award Status Update. I clicked and blinked. Your scholarship application has been denied based on reported family income. I reread it. Then again. My throat tightened. I logged into my FAFSA portal. My heart pounded, not in surprise, but in resignation. The form showed $3,500 a month in parental support. Same figure from the bank statements. So that's what they reported. That I was fully funded, that I needed nothing. I printed the page and walked across campus to the financial aid office. Inside, the receptionist smiled like I was a returning customer. Name? Astrid Malcolm, she typed. 1 sec. Here we are. Denied due to parental contribution above threshold. Looks like everything checks out. Your file shows consistent monthly support. I nodded slowly. Can I get a copy of what was submitted? She frowned. Unfortunately, We can't release parent-submitted data without a formal request. Of course. I walked out holding back tears, not from shame, but from how precisely I'd been erased. Not ignored, rewritten. And in the space where need should have been listed, there was instead a lie with my name on it. Back in my dorm, I shut the door and stared at my laptop for a long time. Then I opened my notes app. I scrolled past my budget spreadsheet, past the email drafts I never sent, until I found a section labeled Conversations That Should Have Mattered. The last entry was dated September 14th. A Zoom call with my mother. It had started with me asking, gently, "Why didn't you help with the textbook? It was under $50. She looked up from whatever she was scrolling on and said, "Celine asks. You never do. She cries when she needs something. You always seem fine." I remember biting the inside of my cheek. I remember wanting to scream that being quiet wasn't peace. It was practice, survival. I had trained myself not to need, because every time I did, I came up empty. But instead, I said nothing. I let her keep talking about Celine's needs, as though I were a houseplant that thrived on neglect. That call was the last time I gave her a chance to explain. Now, months later, I read the scholarship denial again. And it wasn't the money I grieved. It was the realization that need alone meant nothing. That help wasn't about fairness. It was about favor. When someone tells you you'll manage enough times, I whispered, you stop expecting rescue. I sat there, numb, typing that line into my journal. Then another. And when no one shows up, you build your own exits, even if you bleed while walking. I closed the laptop, walked to the sink, washed my face with cold water until I felt real again. The next morning, between lab and lecture, I stopped by my professor's office to drop off an assignment. Dr. Halden looked up, his brows knitting. "Astrid, wait." I turned. "Are you okay?" he asked with real concern. "I've noticed a dip in your participation lately. Your last lab report was late. That's not like you." I forced a smile. "Just a lot on my plate, but I'm managing." He didn't press, just nodded slowly. "Let me know if there's anything I can do." I walked out, backpack heavy against my shoulders. And as I headed to class, one thought rang louder than the rest. If I told the truth about the loans, the fake numbers, the textbook I never got, would it still sound like weakness? Or would it finally sound like what it was? Proof that I was never fine. Thanksgiving Eve came wrapped in gray clouds and an airport coffee I couldn't afford, but bought anyway. I boarded the red-eye flight with a carry-on that weighed more in silence than in contents. Just a few textbooks, my laptop, and an envelope stuffed with bills I wasn't sure I could pay. No gifts, no holiday sweater, just responsibility. Landing in Chicago felt like stepping into a childhood I didn't recognize anymore. Oak Park hadn't changed, but I had. The drive from the airport was quiet. Mom didn't come to get me. It was Dad, barely awake but still polite. The ride was filled with safe questions. "How's school?" "Staying warm out there?" We didn't mention money, or Celine, or anything that actually mattered. When we pulled into the driveway, the porch light flickered once, like it wasn't sure if I deserved a welcome. Inside, the house was just as I remembered. Same smell of lemon wood cleaner, same framed photos on the wall, except all of them were slightly rearranged. In most, I was cropped out. In one, replaced altogether by a print of Celine in a graduation robe. Mom greeted me in the kitchen with a quick nod, no hug. "There's leftover lasagna in the fridge," she said, turning back to whatever she was stirring. Celine was upstairs, already posting family time stories. I hadn't even taken off my shoes yet. That night, I slept in my old room. The same twin bed, same curtains I picked out when I was 10. But the walls felt thinner now, like they'd absorbed too much and weren't sure what belonged anymore. Dinner the next day was quiet at first. Jazz played low from the speaker Dad always kept on the counter. The turkey was overcooked. The mashed potatoes were fine. I sat across from Celine, who looked radiant in a beige silk blouse and gold earrings that caught the light every time she turned to smile at Dad. Midway through the meal, Dad looked up at me and asked casually, "So, is the $1,500 helping with expenses?" I dropped my fork. It clanged louder than it should have. "What money?" He blinked, fork halfway to his mouth. Mom paused mid-cut of turkey. Celine sipped her wine like she hadn't heard. "I'm sorry," Dad asked. "There haven't been any transfers," I said, keeping my voice even. "Not since I started med school, not $1. The room went still. Even the jazz seemed to pause. Dad's eyes shifted to Mom. She didn't look up, just reached for her napkin and dabbed her lips delicately. "I thought we were sending it every month," he said slowly, voice tinged with confusion. "I needed to reroute some of it," Mom replied. "To who?" he asked. "She needed it more," Mom said plainly. "Celine's program is competitive, expensive. Astrid always manages." There it was. That word again. I stared at her. "So managing means starving?" She finally looked up at me. "Don't be dramatic." Dad turned toward me, eyes scanning like he was finally reading a page he'd skimmed too many times. "You've really received nothing?" "Nothing," I repeated. "Not even when I was in the hospital last month." Celine shifted in her seat. "Wait, you were in the hospital?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. A moment of sharp memory hit me, a text I'd received weeks ago. I had brushed it off at the time. It was from Mom. "Make sure she doesn't notice. Transfers under the name again." I thought she meant a utilities bill, or maybe a subscription. Now I realized the she was me. Dad leaned back in his chair, hands loose in his lap. "You told me you were handling the transfers." "I did," Mom said. "But not to her," he finished. Nobody said anything for a long time. Celine looked down at her plate, her smile gone. I pushed back my chair and stood. "Excuse me," I said quietly. "I just need some air." I walked out through the front door and stood on the porch. The wind was colder than I remembered. But it was clean. Honest. It didn't pretend not to sting. Behind me, the house remained still. No one followed. I stayed on the porch long enough for the cold to settle into my bones, but not long enough to shiver. The wind cut across my cheek like it had a point to prove. Inside, I heard muffled movement, chairs scraping, a plate being picked up, but no footsteps in my direction. No one opened the door. No one asked if I was okay. When I finally walked back in, no one looked up. Mom was wiping the counter like it owed her something. Celine scrolled her phone with one hand, her wine glass in the other. Dad stood in the hallway, not saying much, just existing in the pause. That night, I sat cross-legged on my childhood bed, the laptop warming my thighs. I downloaded the last 12 months of statements from the joint trust account Dad had set up for educational use. I highlighted every withdrawal that matched the same recurring amount, $3,500. The name beside each? Celine. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I copied the data into a clean Word doc and titled it with a single line. Where did it go? The next morning, brunch was laid out like nothing had happened. Quiche, fruit salad, sweet rolls. Celine hummed while plating strawberries. Dad poured himself black coffee. Mom filled her glass with orange juice, no champagne this time. I walked in, printouts in hand, and set a crisp white folder in the center of the table. "You can read this now or later," I said. "It has every deposit and every withdrawal. Dates, amounts, accounts, no commentary, just facts." Celine arched an eyebrow. "What is this, a presentation?" "No," I replied. "A fact sheet." Dad reached for the folder first, flipping the pages slowly, lips pressing into a thin line. Mom didn't move. Her nails tapped lightly against her glass. Celine finally leaned over, curiosity outweighing apathy. She froze halfway through page 3. "Wait, this says my account." I met her gaze. "It does?" "Monthly, since last year. While I was skipping meals and working double shifts. While I was in the hospital and you were posting brunch selfies. Dad looked up, jaw clenched. Is this accurate? No one answered. He looked at Mom. Leona. She took a slow sip of her juice, eyes steady. It was still used for education. Not hers, he said. I had to make a judgment call. Without telling me? He asked. She needed it more. She needed $42,000 more? Celine sank back into her chair, lips parted like she wanted to say something, but didn't know how. I didn't stay. I left the room, grabbed my coat, and stepped outside again. The sun was out, but it didn't warm me. I walked to the end of the block, past houses I used to recognize. I sat on a bench at the corner park, phone off, mind quiet. When I turned it on hours later, the screen lit up like a holiday sale. 83 missed calls, 24 texts, all from Mom. You misunderstood. We can talk. Don't escalate this. You're stronger. She's sensitive. That last one hit like a fist through silk. I stared at the message. I thought about every time she said I was strong, and how that word was used as a pass, for her, for everyone else, to do less. I typed one sentence in reply. That sentence is why you lost me. Then I deleted the entire thread. The house was still when I woke up, not in the comforting way childhood memories often are, but in that unnerving, hollowed-out silence that follows a wound no one wants to talk about. Downstairs, I heard the low hum of Dad's printer and the faint clatter of his keyboard. It was just past 11. Thanksgiving leftovers were untouched in the fridge. No one had bothered to reheat a thing. I tiptoed to the stairs and paused halfway down when I caught sight of him through the narrow crack in the home office door. He sat hunched forward, glasses low on his nose, scanning a screen like the truth might blur if he didn't squint hard enough. She said it was locked, he muttered. The trust fund portal was open on his monitor. I recognized the layout, same one I'd seen weeks ago when I downloaded my statements. He clicked through entries like flipping pages in a courtroom binder. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to something heavier, betrayal with a coat of dust on it. When I came down an hour later, he didn't look up. He just nodded once, the kind of nod that said, "We'll talk, but not here." The next morning, everyone moved around the kitchen like it was a stage set. Too careful, too rehearsed. Brunch was being prepped. Quiche, cut fruit, artisan bread. Celine was already dressed like she was about to be photographed, makeup perfect, curls deliberate. Mom moved between sink and oven, pretending not to feel the shift in gravity. Dad sat at the table. "How did you get around the trustee lock?" he asked, eyes steady on Mom. She paused mid-pour of orange juice. "I filed for early disbursement, still for education." He didn't blink. "She's in fashion." She gave him a practiced look. "That's part of the modern economy, Byron. It's business now." He leaned forward. "Astrid's in medicine." I waited for someone, anyone, to say something useful, but it hung there, like fog inside the walls. Then Mom turned to me with that same tone she used when I was a kid asking for candy before dinner. "You always figure things out. You always land on your feet." I swallowed that down without replying. Later that afternoon, while walking past the garage on my way to grab my charger from the car, I stopped. The light was on inside and the door slightly ajar. Through the crack, I saw her. She was crouched beside a shipping box, sliding an envelope inside. On the box, in her neat handwriting, "From Dad." She sealed it, then stood quickly, unaware I'd seen. I didn't say a word. I just stepped back, out of sight, and turned on my phone camera long enough to snap a photo of the label. That evening, I waited until Dad had poured his usual decaf and was settling into the armchair. I sat across from him and showed him the image. He stared at the screen, then at me. "She didn't even ask me," he said after a beat, voice thin. I didn't nod, didn't answer. I let him sit with it. That night, the hallway light stayed on longer than usual. Around midnight, I heard the soft creak of the guest room door being opened. then closed. Dad didn't sleep in the master bedroom again. The next day, I received a text from Celine. "Why are you turning everyone against Mom?" I stared at it for a moment, then replied, "I didn't say anything. I just showed the numbers." The message was marked read. No response came. But the silence? That finally made sense. Monday morning hit like a reset button I didn't ask for. I boarded the early flight back to Philadelphia, with barely a word exchanged between me and my father. He offered to drive me to the airport, and I accepted, because I didn't want to give my mother the satisfaction of a goodbye. The silence in the car was thick, but not angry, just tired. He helped me lift my bag into the trunk, then said, "Be safe." I nodded. That was it. Back in my dorm, the radiator hissed like it remembered me. I dropped my coat over the chair and plugged in my phone, which had been off for the entire flight. As soon as it powered up, a notification popped. Missed call. Celine. Voicemail, one new. I hesitated, then hit play. "Hey, She exhaled into the mic like she was trying to conjure emotion. "I know things got weird, but I'm really struggling now. Studio rent's due, and Mom said she can't send more this month. You've always had a good heart." "Help?" The words help and heart clung to each other like a rehearsed line. There it was. A soft apology, wrapped around a withdrawal request. Even her tone was familiar. That gentle cadence she used when she wanted something but didn't want to say it directly. I didn't answer right away. I let the message sit for a few hours while I caught up on assignments and emails. Then, around noon, I texted her back. "I forgave a long time ago, but that doesn't mean I'm funding denial." No reply came. That night, while scrolling through Instagram stories during a late dinner of scrambled eggs and toast, I got a screenshot from an old friend from high school, Clara, someone who'd known us both since elementary. She sent the image with 3 words. "You seen this?" I opened it. Celine, sitting on a park bench, holding a cup of overpriced coffee, looking straight into the camera. Eyes slightly red, hair styled in loose curls. The caption, "Some sisters break you more than strangers ever could." Below it, in soft script font, "Even family betrays." Hashtags lined the bottom like a courtroom transcript. Sisterhood broken, circs support each other. Healing journey. Forgiveness. Takes time comments flooded in. "You deserve better." "So proud of your strength." "Cut out the toxicity, queen." I didn't flinch. I didn't roll my eyes either. I just stared at it, longer than I meant to. This wasn't about feelings anymore. It was about strategy. Celine had pivoted, like any good PR person does. When the numbers stopped working in her favor, she changed the story. Framed herself as the wounded party. Painted me as a betrayer. I could have commented. I could have posted a screenshot of the bank records or the trust withdrawals. But that would have made me look like the very villain she needed me to be. So instead, I updated my timeline. The one only I could see. 12/5. Celine. Public sympathy campaign launched. Objective. Isolate Astrid. Narrative. Betrayal. Emotional trauma. Tactic. Indirect blame. Plus. Passive image. Underneath it, I wrote, "Let her build it." The truth doesn't blink. Then I turned off my phone. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I didn't need the noise. By mid-December, the city had gone gray. Even the sky looked exhausted. Finals were around the corner, and campus buzzed with the kind of quiet that only comes from people holding their breath. I was walking back from the science building when I saw a text from Dad. "I just want you to know, I'm meeting the attorney this week." I stopped on the sidewalk, wind biting at my neck. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then, I put the phone back in my coat pocket and kept walking. He hadn't asked for advice. He hadn't asked for permission. He just decided. Sometimes people change, not because you begged them to, but because the truth finally stared back hard enough. The next day, I got a message from my aunt, who lives 3 towns over and only texts when someone's either born or buried. I heard. Is it true? Your dad filed? So it was done. Later that week, while standing in line for coffee near campus, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a tag notification on social media. Someone had mentioned me in a story. It was a post from a local lifestyle blog I didn't follow. Headline: Creative Visionary honored for her resilience and family legacy. The image: Celine in a deep green jumpsuit, accepting a plaque from some grant foundation. Her smile stretched wide, the kind of wide that says, "I planned this moment down to the last mascara blink." The article quoted her: "Growing up in a home full of sacrifice and intellect shaped who I am. I'm endlessly grateful for my family's belief in my dream." But what made my stomach knot wasn't her name, it was my mother's. "We made tough choices," the quote read, "so she could focus on her path. We've always believed in her vision." Tough choices. The irony was surgical. I saved the article. Then I opened a new browser tab and searched the foundation's name. They had a contact form. I hesitated for a second, not out of fear, but because I wanted the words to land like truth, not revenge. I uploaded 3 documents: a PDF of trust fund withdrawals, every $3,500 transfer, screenshots of Celine's sponsored content, and her brunch lifestyle reels. A short note. It read, "Sacrifice is not a hashtag. Some of us lived it." I didn't sign my name. I didn't need to. That night, I turned off all my notifications. Phone, email, even Slack. I didn't want applause. I wanted quiet. I pulled out my scholarship application, reopened the draft I had buried months ago. And this time, I wrote without editing myself to make others comfortable. "I don't come from nothing," I typed. "I come from being forgotten." I detailed the missed meals, the night shifts, the hospital stay, not as sob stories, but as facts. I wasn't applying to be rescued. I was documenting the excavation. I ended it with one line: "Resilience isn't inherited. It's chosen." Then I hit submit. I closed my laptop and leaned back, not relieved, just steady. Some battles aren't about winning. Sometimes, it's just about choosing not to disappear. The last week of December arrived under the guise of normalcy. Quiet buildings, dusty windows, and the smell of burnt coffee in every academic hallway. Finals were done. Grades were pending. Most students had gone home. I stayed back a few days to close out lab work and catch up on hours I'd been forced to miss earlier in the semester. On Thursday morning, I was walking across the courtyard, gloves tucked into my coat sleeve, hands raw from handling beakers and bins, when Professor Lathrop passed me on the sidewalk. He smiled with recognition, then paused. "Oh, you're Celine, right? The one with the creative grant?" I stopped walking. It took me a second to realize he was serious. "No," I said, trying to keep my voice flat. "I'm the other daughter, the one who paid for it." He flushed, adjusted his scarf, and mumbled something about mixing up names. I nodded, kept walking, but the sting wasn't from him. It was from knowing exactly how it happened. She had overwritten the narrative with such precision that even people who had seen me in scrubs thought I was the sister in silk. Later that day, I saw another blog post. "My sister and I are close," Celine was quoted saying. "I owe her a lot." Underneath, a photo. I knew when it was taken, our last Thanksgiving before college. What I didn't know was that the original image had included me. The version they used had me cropped out, only Celine visible, her arm hovering where mine had once been. That kind of editing wasn't accidental, it was a choice. 2 days later, I flew home for Christmas. I didn't want to, but Dad had asked. "Just this one," he'd said. "It'll be different." I didn't ask how. I already knew better. The house looked festive, tree-lit, fireplace running, carols on a loop. Corliss didn't say much. She didn't need to. Her presence was loud even in silence. Christmas Eve dinner was roast and sides, nothing too extravagant. We sat at the table like actors in a play we hadn't rehearsed. Celine laughed louder than necessary. Dad kept refilling everyone's drinks like distraction was his job. After dinner, it was time for presents. Celine got new travel gear, a sleek Polaroid camera, and a stack of gift cards. Target, Sephora, Airbnb. She squealed, thanked everyone, even hugged Dad. I watched from the corner of the room. There was no box with my name, no stocking, no tag, not even a card. I didn't ask. No one explained. Corliss kept humming along to the music like nothing was missing. After they all went to bed, I walked upstairs, packed my bag, and zipped it shut with finality. The next morning, I caught Dad in the kitchen, halfway through a cup of coffee. "I'm heading back," I said, his brows lifted. "You don't have to—" "Class starts sooner than they think." He nodded, then reached into the drawer near the stove and handed me a small folded receipt. I opened it. It was from the bookstore, a new anatomy atlas, paid in full. "Not everything was forgotten," he said. I folded it back up and slipped it into my coat pocket. I didn't hug him. He didn't reach for one. As I walked out the door, no one called after me. I didn't slam it. I didn't look back. I left the house the way you leave a hotel after a bad stay, polite, detached, and sure you won't be coming back. Philadelphia greeted me with wet sidewalks and the familiar smell of city grime clinging to my coat. The dorm hallways were quiet, most students still home for the holidays. I dropped my bag, kicked off my boots, and opened the small window above the heater just wide enough to breathe. 2 days later, a letter arrived in my campus mailbox. No return address, just the logo of a loan servicing company. Reminder, payment on education loan IDGI, Malcolm 2387 is due January 15th. I froze. I hadn't taken out a loan. I knew every digit of my FAFSA record, and nothing like this existed. I sat down at my desk and called the number listed. After verifying my name, the woman on the line said cheerfully, "Yes, we have a balance of $8,900 on file for an education program, co-signed digitally by A.S. Malcolm." "What school?" I asked, though I already had a sinking feeling. She listed a private design institute in Los Angeles, fashion certificate program. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I asked, "And the billing address?" She read off my parents' house. My mother's name was listed as the alternate contact. I thanked her, hung up, and sat there, completely still. My name had been used, without my consent, again. And this time, for something that had absolutely nothing to do with me. I pulled up the PDF from my email inbox, printed it, and walked it straight to the campus legal services office. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I filled out the fraud report with the same calm you'd use to pack a box. It wasn't emotionless. It was efficient. The next afternoon, I stopped by the coffee shop on campus to decompress. As I waited for my drink, someone tapped my shoulder. "Astrid?" I turned. It was Mrs. Anitra, our old neighbor from Oak Park. She was visiting her granddaughter for a campus tour. "Oh my goodness," she said. "You look so grown. How's life abroad?" I blinked. "Abroad?" "Yes, your mom said you dropped out and went to Europe. Met someone." I stared at her, stunned. "I don't even have a passport." She laughed awkwardly. "Well, I must have misunderstood." "No," I said gently. "You didn't." Later that evening, I scanned and emailed all the documents, the loan fraud, the altered FAFSA data, the bank statements, directly to my father. I didn't attach a message, just the truth. He replied the next morning. "I've already started the reversal petition with the trust attorneys. This won't be fast, but it'll be done." I read it twice. Then finally, I exhaled. That evening, I cooked dinner for myself for the first time in weeks. A real meal. Garlic chicken, steamed broccoli, rice from a proper pot, not a microwave pouch. I set the table. I poured water into a glass, not a bottle. No phone beside me, no music, just a warm bowl and a fork. I didn't need someone to watch me eat to make it count. I sat there, quiet, and for the first time, It felt like enough. January dragged its feet like an old man in snow boots, slow, deliberate, and uninterested in urgency. I found my rhythm again, not in celebration, but in consistency. I graded biology quizzes in the tutoring lab, packed lunch with intention, and stopped checking my phone for reactions. One afternoon, while highlighting errors on a lab worksheet, my phone vibrated. I glanced at the screen and froze. FaceTime, Mom. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then, against every instinct, I picked up. Her face filled the screen, haloed by soft golden lighting. Behind her, strings of white lights twinkled, music thumped faintly, and Celine laughed off camera. "We were just talking about you," Mom said, all teeth and practiced warmth. "Celine got invited to Paris Fashion Week. Can you believe it?" My silence was answer enough, but she plowed ahead. "She's networking like crazy," she added. "You should see the list of designers she's working with." "How's school?" she tacked on, like it was a formality. I tilted the phone slightly so she could catch a glimpse of the tutoring lab behind me. Fluorescent lights, whiteboards, stacks of student folders. "Still not luxury, apparently," I said. She blinked. Either she didn't catch the tone or chose not to. "That's good," she said, smiling. "You always make it work." I hit the red button before she could continue. Afterward, I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I didn't even sigh. I saved the screenshot of her mid-party grin, filed it into a private folder on my phone, and renamed it Last Call Answered. The caption I typed under it in my notes: "This is the last time I pick up out of politeness." That Saturday, Dad came to town for a business review. He didn't say he was coming until the morning of. Just texted, "In Philly, got groceries. Can I stop by?" I met him at the cafe 2 blocks from campus. He slid into the booth across from me like a man who finally understood silence. No apologies, just presence. He placed a second-hand anatomy atlas on the table between us. "Saw this at a thrift shop," he said. "Still has your tabs in it." I opened it, smiled faintly. "This is my copy, from freshman year." "I should have asked more questions," he said, eyes on the steam rising from his coffee. "I stopped needing the answers," I replied. We didn't hug goodbye. He just handed me a brown paper bag with frozen chicken, rice, 2 apples, and one oddly specific post-it that read, "Double-check your oil levels." That night, I sat by my desk with the window cracked slightly. Snow floated sideways outside. The radiator rattled, familiar and oddly comforting. I pulled out my journal, wrote slowly, deliberately. I used to think strength meant silence. Now I know it means choice. I walked over to the fridge, grabbed a sticky note, and pressed it onto the freezer door. On it, I wrote, "Survived, yes, but no longer starving." Then I turned off the light. The first green broke through the soil sometime in March. It wasn't dramatic, just the tiniest sprig poking out of the university greenhouse planter, defiant against weeks of frost. I stood there staring at it longer than made sense, my hands still dirty from repotting seedlings. I'd started volunteering twice a week, not for credits, not for pay, just because it was quiet, because nothing asked anything of me except to show up and water what was mine. My classes were manageable now. The scholarship had been reinstated after the review board accepted my amended paperwork and affidavit. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to cut back on bar shifts and sleep like a person again. On a Tuesday evening, just after I got back from the lab, my phone rang. "Celine." I let it ring 3 times before picking up. Her voice was fast, clipped at the edges. "Mom's only sending me $1,000 a month now. That doesn't even cover rent. You have Dad's attention now. Do you think this is fair?" I let the silence hang. She was waiting for sympathy. Instead, I said, "I lived on 0. Remember that before you complain about less than you expected." She didn't respond. The line went quiet. Then the call ended. I stared at the phone for a second, not out of hurt, but because it felt like the final page in a chapter I didn't want to reread. No scream, no curse, just stillness. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Some people only learn empathy through absence." I didn't mean it as cruel, just accurate. The weekend came, and I bought myself a cake from the grocery store. One of those simple single-layer chocolate ones with too much icing and exactly the right amount of celebration. I brought it home, lit one small candle, and sat at my kitchen table. No one else was there. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and whispered, "I'm proud of you. Not for surviving, but for choosing not to shrink." Monday morning, I checked my mail. Among the flyers and coupons was an envelope from the trust attorney's office. Inside, confirmation of asset reallocation, legal language, bullet points, clauses. My name spelled correctly for once. At the bottom, a handwritten line added by someone in the office. "This amount is yours, not because you asked louder, but because someone finally listened." I folded the paper and set it beside my coffee. Then I opened my laptop and got to work. Lecture notes, emails, grant proposals, not to prove anything, just because I could. Later that afternoon, as I walked past a group of undergrads laughing outside the library, I caught a glimpse of myself in the glass. Straight back, steady steps. That's the thing about survival. One day, it turns into living, and by the time they notice, you're already free.